Oh, goodness. Okay. Sorry, gosh, that's not a great way to start the stream. All right. I put my tea like to steep in the room temperature water. I had a mug with room temperature water and a mug with hot water, and my tea has been steeping the whole time in the room temperature water. So I thought that my tea was ready, and it ends up that my tea was not ready. And I was going to be like, oh, hey there, everybody, or whatever. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get into our Corona class. The emphasis is going to be on 19th century nationalism. Now, that can include Greek independence. It could include the revolutions of 1830, 1848, Italian and German unification. It can include Zionism, okay, which we want to understand Zionism as a nationalist movement. Okay, what we have there is Jewish nationalism. So with that, go ahead and get your questions in, and I'll be taking questions on these topics. Now, those of you in the Corona class, this is going to be very likely our last official broadcast, like as far as our 1 p.m. slots. If you're in the Corona class, make sure you go to crowdcast.io/Tom Richey to register for the Corona class so that you're getting updates. I'll let you know when I'm going live next week. Okay. I'll be sending out with all kinds of stuff about the live events. Okay, so we're not done going live. Now, also, I want to remind everybody that I've got a review app, Romulus Euro. Okay, so Romulus Euro, which is a nice little trivia app. It's only $1.99. It's usually $2.99, but we thought we'd mark it down this year. So it's a little trivia app that is going to allow you to get into basically just reviewing a topic of your choice. So Romulus Euro is available at the App Store and at the Google Play Store. So just keeping that in mind for your review needs. It's a nice little handy way to review, because when you're going over the DBQ, one of the things that gets people on the DBQ is that they are not ready with their outside evidence. They're like, who was that person again? What was that legislation called? That sort of thing. So when it comes time for that, you want to make sure that you know those things, that you're not relying on study guides for your outside evidence. So the Romulus app is going to be very good for positioning you to do very well on your DBQ, in the sense that you've got all of that trivial knowledge ready. So with that, just keep that in mind. And I'm going to be now answering questions. Let's take a look here. All right, that's funny. Shivam, I was late for class today. I appreciate that. Right now, I'm drinking the room temperature tea water. That's just kind of like, okay. So with that, can I go over Italian unification? Okay. Now, Mark, one thing I want to note here is the College Board Dbq that was put out is a repurposed Dbq from what I think like maybe 2013, 2010, that sort of thing. What we want to understand is that before 2016, AP Euro Dbq prompts tended to be on like, specific topics that a lot of people didn't know a lot about. And there would be background information. This is how the exam used to be. There would be a blurb with some background information, and then you would know a little bit about it. So what the College Board has done has been extremely lazy, in the sense that, they're going back and getting topics with very specific prompts that a lot of people don't know about. And then the documents that they picked for this, they had Mazzini, they had Garibaldi, they had Cavour. Where is your room for outside evidence? Okay, that Italian unification Dbq was a real garbage move by the College Board. Like, I really think that was a garbage move to put that in front of you, and then the documents are going to steal the most obvious outside evidence from you. So I would not think in terms of that Italian unification Dbq is going to be something that is going to be like what you're going to see on the exam. So as far as that goes, I can see Mark. Now, Mark, you can't, okay, so yeah, you may have panicked over the College Board Dbq, but what we want to note is that it's really like that should not be what you're going to encounter on the exam. The exam is more likely going to be on a broader topic that is going to give you some more room to argue. Okay, so it's some room to argue, some room for outside evidence. I strongly doubt that the Test Development Committee is going to, throw something obscure like that. And when I say that Italian unification is obscure, what I'm saying is that it's something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. It gets overshadowed by German unification, which definitely had a much more profound effect. Okay, so with that, I think that that we need to be I don't think that the thing is, I've written 4 DBQs for this exam in AP Euro. I've written multiple DBQs for this exam in AP US. By the time this exam is administered, I, Tom Richey, individual person, okay, will have written 7 or 8 DBQs. And so the College Board, with their multi-million-dollar budget, can't write practice DBQs specifically for this exam. That's just, I don't get it, okay? So as far as that goes, and when you look at recent DBQs, you see that there was over a century. Did the Catholic Church support science? During this 100-year period? Was the English, was the Glorious Revolution part of the Enlightenment? Was the 30 Years' War about politics or religion? So these are, topics that y'all understand here, that these are topics that are accessible to most people. And so what they're doing is they're just taking these things that they've already done. They're carelessly snipping the documents. I mean, what the expletive, okay, with putting Mazzini, Cavour, and Garibaldi in the freaking documents and raiding your outside evidence, okay? So the thing is that, if we think about this, if we put a poll out here, those of you in the crowdcast, okay, so we think about this, did you feel like all of your outside evidence was stolen from you by the documents, okay, in the Italian Unification Dbq? Okay, so yes or no. I'm just kind of curious what y'all felt. Did y'all feel like, hey, if this wouldn't have been in the documents, I could have used this? Like, I could have used Mazzini in the in the Young Italy movement. Okay, so thank y'all so much. Okay, so we see here, would not have known anything. Yeah, so as far that I were a fan of Italian opera. Okay, so Ryan, you're a funny guy. Ryan in the YouTube chat over there. So with that, those of you that tried this, you understand what I'm saying. The Test Development Committee, I mean, there are some great people on the Test Development Committee, by the way, that I'm going to forecast that what they're going to put on this year's exam is going to give you room, okay? When they design this DBQ, it's not going to be a little careless cut and paste operation, okay? So I think that y'all are really just thinking in terms of that, okay? So afraid with this open book, they're going to throw a curveball. Okay, I don't think it's going to be that much of a curveball, in the sense that, now, if it is a curveball, it's still, see, this is the thing as far as what they've got to do. The College Board has to avoid making people angry or upset. Here's the thing that they are really in. What we've got to understand, I'm just doing POV analysis, okay? What I'm doing here is POV analysis. And hey, you know what? That's great, okay? When you're thinking about reliable sources of information, that is a great thesis there, Strawberry. Tom Richey is leagues more reliable than the College Board because he cares about his students and knows what students need, okay? And that is a thesis complete with a two-pronged line of reasoning. Nice job, Strawberry. Okay, so as far as that goes, when we look at the College Board POV, they are in such a bad situation right now. And the other part of this is it's going to be in full view of everyone. So if the DBQ is not good, if it's on a super obscure topic and it raids all, I mean, it plunders outside evidence. This Italian Unification DBQ, it was just like, Attila the Hun couldn't have done a better job just plundering the outside evidence here. So that's something that I think is is important here. So, I tell you, I've written so many DBQs. With every additional DBQ I write, it's stronger odds that I'll actually write a DBQ that might be on the topic of the exam. That would be really funny if I ended up one of my DBQs was something that was on the exam. So. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I'm basically giving y'all my raw personal opinion on this. I'm just tired of it. Now, here's the other thing, that since they put out a DBQ on Italian unification, we know that's not going to be it. Now, Italian unification could somehow be relevant, but here's another thing about POV analysis. They wouldn't have said, "Hey, everybody, here's a DBQ about Italian unification," and then there's no DBQ. And then Italian unification is a DBQ. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. So what we want to understand is when we're thinking, yeah, and I think that the way they did that prompt was sloppy. Okay. Like it's just a sloppy. It's just a slop fest. All right. It was just a big fat slop fest, is what I see there. And so with that, Tatum, remember that I recommend a 3-document strategy for the DBQ. So if you don't understand the documents, that's what I think about a 3-document strategy for the DBQ. So with that, Victoria, it could be, here's one thing, Victoria, what we might want to do. Is there anybody that's got a list of DBQ topics that the College Board has put out? Okay, so when we think about the topics that they've put out, could we possibly eliminate those topics and think about the topics where they've been silent? Okay, so when we think about this, this is something where you could think the age of exploration. I tell you what, Victoria, I think we might. Have we seen anything on the age of exploration? This is something that I think we need to think about. Okay, that none of the DBQs that have been put out so far have been on the age of exploration. Let's think about this. Okay, in terms of that, the age of exploration, mercantilism. Let's see. I'm asking somebody something. I'll be right. This is actually a very relevant text message. Yeah. So one thing that I can't really think of something where, so all the points for doing 3 So Victoria, what I would say here is when it comes to documents, I recommend using either 3 documents or 5 documents. The hang up with using 4 documents is if you screw one up, then you lose that point. And you used 2 more documents for nothing. Okay. So basically, if you're trying for 2 points, you need to use 3. If you're trying for, for the 4 document point, you need to. So if you're trying for the 2 document point, you need to use 3. If you're trying for the 4 document point, you need to use 5. Okay. So as far as this, now what so Holly, this is not exactly what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is not a list of DBQs that have been put out. I'm looking for, in general, I'm looking for a list of DBQs that the College Board has released in this, so when we think about this in this cycle, okay, we think about this exam cycle, what are the DBQs that have been put out? So we've seen religious toleration, we've seen Italian unification, we've seen the Industrial Revolution. So here are some things that we want to think about here. What have we seen? What have we not seen? Okay. So as far as that goes, Victoria, I would recommend for the revolutions of 1848, I've got videos. I've got a 5-part video series on the revolutions of 1848. That is, that's something that I've got a general introduction. Then I've got German states, Italy, and France. And then I've got Why Not Britain and Russia. I would recommend watching that whole series if you're serious. Now, one thing, somebody just mentioned the Pilgrimage of Grace. What's important there is that's a great example of what they used to do before 2016, where it was much more dependent on using the documents. It wasn't dependent on outside evidence. So the Pilgrimage of Grace, I'm going to be honest, is like a first or second year Euro teacher. When I saw that DBQ, I was like, oh, I didn't know this happened. And so, yeah, so they would go on to things like that sometimes where you're like, I didn't even know this happened. And they would put that out there. That's not what they've done since 2016. We all know Bismarck. We all know the Glorious Revolution. We all know the 30 Years' War, right? We all know the Scientific Revolution. So those are things there. Now, the revolutions of 1848, what we want to understand is, first of all, the broad kind of perspective here, that the revolutions of 1848 are basically going on in continental Europe, not in Russia, but in France, the German states, and Italy. And so what we're seeing here are these revolutions that are, but with coalitions of like liberals and nationalists and socialists, all who are fed up with the conservative order. Now, here's the thing, though, when you start to think about a coalition of liberals and nationalists and socialists, this is the thing where you think about classical liberals and you think about socialists. They're not, okay? They don't, okay? This is like two north magnets or two south magnets. They're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to function together. And so because like the revolutionaries couldn't get anything really, really done in terms of putting together a policy that they all liked. Now, also remember, if it came, to a liberal having to decide, do I want to make a deal with conservatives or do I want to make a deal with socialists? The liberals are going to run over to the conservatives, okay? Because the liberals and the conservatives are both concerned about the protection of private property, that they are scared to death that socialists are going to use their position in the government for an assault on property and to put together schemes for the redistribution of wealth. So we see here that the conservatives, end up coming back into power because the revolutionaries weren't really ideologically united. They weren't organized, or because there was some foreign help. So when we think about like France, for example, Louis Napoleon is elected president. Within about 2 years, Louis Napoleon has gone in a much more conservative direction and proclaims himself Napoleon III. Okay, so France now has an empire. We've got the Second French Empire going from, with Napoleon III as a result of the revolutions of 1848. Now, in the German states, in the German Confederation, there was the meeting of the Frankfurt Parliament. Now, the Frankfurt Parliament represents liberal nationalism. The Frankfurt Parliament represents liberal nationalism. And when we think about liberal nationalism, this is something that they decided, we're going to write a constitution for Germany. We're going to invite the King of Prussia to be the king of a united Germany. And then, we think in terms of the King of Prussia says, I don't want a crown from out of the gutter. Okay, so as far as that goes, we're thinking in terms of that. So we're thinking about, I don't want a crown from the gutter. I don't want a pig crown or something like that, right? Okay, so I don't want a pig crown. Okay, so with that, yes, yes, it does. Okay, so. Okay, so as far as that goes, we're seeing that, with this, I'm seeing from what they've released so far. We've got imperialism. Let's see, I think we can add. Okay, so when it comes time for, like, when we think about imperialism and Italian unification, these are the DBQs that the College Board has put out there. So that's something that we want to note on this. So with that, can we go? Oh, so we go for Germany. Germany doesn't unite because the liberals are not able to persuade the King of Prussia. There's a conservative reaction. Now, In Italy, what happens here, and this is part of the Italian Unification movement, is that Mazzini, who was a romantic nationalist, they wanted to have their capital at Rome, and they went in. Garibaldi is with Mazzini, and they proclaimed the Roman Republic. Now, what happens is the Pope isn't happy with this, because this is in the middle of the Papal States, and the Pope calls on help from outside Catholic nations. Excuse me. And so France and Austria get involved, and they are undoing the, this revolution of 1848 in Italy. So we see that these revolutions generally fail. Now, in Italy and Germany, what goes on here, this is great contextualization, that in Italy and Germany, you see that in Italy, that romantic nationalism has failed to unify Italy, and in Germany, liberal nationalism. Okay, so as far as that, we get into liberal nationalism, going from there, and that does not, liberal nationalism doesn't work there. So with Germany, we want to think about Bismarck's blood and iron speech. Okay, so Bismarck's blood and iron speech is something that Bismarck's blood and iron speech is saying that the position of Prussia in Germany. Now, I've got my Bismarck rap where I'm thinking about, am I quoting his speech or am I quoting myself in the rap? The Bismarck rap is available on my SoundCloud. On my SoundCloud, in the Bismarck rap, the position of Prussia in Germany at this hour will not be determined by its liberalism, but its power. Okay, great questions aren't decided by speeches or majorities. It's blood and iron. I'll use war to spread authority. That's from the song. Okay, that's from the Bismarck rap. That's available on my SoundCloud. So the position, you know what? I really shouldn't I? Let's see. So let me see here. Bismarck rap. Okay, so let's think about this. So Bismarck rap instrumental. Okay, so I'm going to get this going. All right, so let's see. Okay. All right, so let me get my lyrics, because I don't think that I've got, let's see. Okay, and actually, I think that's in my Google Drive. Let me just run in here real quick. Okay, so. Okay, let's see. Okay, actually, I think I might have, okay, I think maybe I've got that there. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Let me run in here. I'm just going to go to my SoundCloud there. Okay, so let's see. Top Bismarck rap. Okay, where is that? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into there. I've got my lyrics here. So as far as that goes, that's on my SoundCloud. Let me get into here. Okay. All right. Okay, y'all ready? Okay, let's see. So we're going to get this going. All right. So yeah, we're going to, oh, can you have the instrumental? I don't know if I'm able to, that I'm not sure if I'm able to spread that or not. But with that, let's go ahead and get this going. All right. So Warm Water Records, Otto von Bismarck. All right. Y'all ready for this? Got some German Unification, blood and iron, blood and bars. I'm the Iron Chancellor, and I feel an obligation. Unify the German states under Prussian domination. A conservative at heart, but I've got a little trick. It's the politics of power. Call it real politic. An alliance with the liberals, because I'm industry emphatic and they're secular. They like my cultured cop against the Catholics and the social democrats, because I'm gonna put it bluntly that Germany will never be a socialist country. I've got old age pensions and some accident insurance. If you're hurt at work, I've got your back. You've got my reassurance. Call it state socialism. Now the liberals want to hate. But without the working classes, we can't unify the state. The position of Prussia in Germany at this hour will not be determined by its liberalism, but its power. Great questions aren't decided by speeches or majorities. It's blood and iron. I'll use war to spread authority. With the Austrians as allies, we took Schleswig and Holstein, then declared war on Austria. The next step in my grand design. Prussia won in 7 weeks. Austria wasn't any match. Then it's time to provoke France with the M's dispatch. Moki led a modern army, armed with telegraphs and trains. France decisively defeated, gave up Francis and Lorraine. After unifying Germany, then I really had some clout. Then it's 1890 and I'm out. Okay, I tell you what, I've been streaming so much. My voice is giving me some warnings. Okay, my voice is giving me a few warnings that I need to be very careful. Okay, because my voice is like, hey, there are some things that I'm not able to do. So I need to make sure. Okay, so I need to make sure I'm able to do that. Okay, so with that, so going from there, you know, we're you know, so thank y'all for that. But yeah, my voice is not doing everything there. Okay, causes and consequences of the Crimean War. Basically, the Crimean War, and this is not a major war. This is the kind of thing that we might have seen before the redesign, like on, you know, something before that. But we're probably not going to see something that just focuses only on the Crimean War. Okay, but the cause of the Crimean War was basically Russia going into Crimea. Of course, that's happened again somewhat recently, right? But Russia went into Crimea and they're trying to expand their sphere of influence. Okay, they're trying to expand their sphere of influence on the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe. Okay, that's something that is, you know, the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe. That's, you know, basically Russia's trying to move in. Britain and France are concerned about the balance of power. So the Crimean War is a balance of power war. Now, as far as the consequences of the Crimean War, what we're seeing there is that modernization of the military. So when we think about Alfred Lord Tennyson's charge of the Light Brigade, okay, so one thing we see is that in the British military, for example, people purchased commissions before the Crimean War. If you wanted a certain rank in the British military, you had to purchase commissions, okay, in that you know, in that space. So you had to purchase commissions, and with that, you know, we've got to, you know, you've got to purchase commissions. After the Crimean War, it's based on merit. So we see a greater amount of meritocracy. Now, I've already recommended the movie to y'all, Zulu, which Zulu, I think it's an amazing movie. It inspired Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the siege of, you know, we think about, you know, the climactic, like, you know, battle, the Battle of Helm's Deep, okay, that happens at the end of The Two Towers. Peter Jackson was really in a lot of ways nodding to Zulu there. And so going from there, we look at the consequences of, yeah, so when we think about Zulu, for example, the two main characters are two British military officers. One of them who comes from the old aristocracy and like the traditional military aristocracy, and another one who's an engineering officer that comes from, you know, more of a meritocracy, like a middle class background. So you see basically these two officers interacting, and this interaction between this old like military aristocrat and this you know, this guy that's more of, you know, in a meritocracy position. And so that's something that you can see, that kind of tension in that film. So the consequences of the Crimean War, you've got essentially the modernization of militaries. Okay, now, what is realpolitik? Realpolitik is the rejection of ideology. Okay, so realpolitik of, you know, is the rejection of hard ideology. So for example, when you think about the Dbq, about Bismarck, and where we're thinking about in terms of, was Bismarck a traditional conservative or a new kind of conservative? That a traditional conservative tries to repress any kind of ideological enemy. So when we think about the Carlsbad decrees and that sort of thing. So going with that, that when we're looking at realpolitik, if Bismarck wants to industrialize and the liberals want to industrialize, you know what? Let me take up this liberal position. When the social democrats are becoming a force, that the working class is supporting the social democrats. Well, what Bismarck does is what the liberals, who had a falling out with him, called state socialism. So Bismarck, in order to try to outmaneuver the social democrats, that he did accident insurance, health insurance, old age pensions. And so Bismarck creates the first welfare state in a form of realpolitik, okay, where Bismarck, in this form of realpolitik, is using socialist policies to try to undermine the Social Democratic Party. And so Bismarck is going whatever direction he feels like he has to in order to bring this about. So with that, we're going to note that's realpolitik. Cavour basically put together a series of alliances. Cavour was somebody that, like Garibaldi, didn't trust Cavour a whole lot, but he felt like, Cavour's the guy that's going to make this happen. Garibaldi, remember, was originally running with Mazzini and, these romantic nationalists, but Garibaldi decides, you know what, Cavour's going to get the job done. Okay, here's a guy that I may not trust him, but he knows what he's doing. He's going to be the guy who can unify Italy. So Cavour does this by diplomacy and getting some of the great powers behind him in terms of creating some strategic alliances. Whereas Bismarck's realpolitik, where he says, look, that we're not, the position of Prussia and Germany at this hour will not be determined by its liberalism, but it's power. And that's almost a direct quote. It's close enough to a direct quote to do that, okay? So basically, blood and iron. When Bismarck says blood and iron, we're going to war for German unification, that's what you're going to see there. All right. Now, why is the Crimean War important for this topic? Let's just run real quick and let's see. So AP Euro. Let's just see where the Crimean War is mentioned and what you might be required to know about. Okay, actually, so the Crimean War, this is national unification and diplomatic tensions. Okay, so the weakness of so what we're doing here is that we're seeing the weakness of the Ottoman Empire. It says it contributed to the breakdown of the concert of Europe. Okay, so when you think about this, so here's something to note about the Crimean War and why the Crimean War is important for this topic. Okay, so I was answering earlier about the Crimean War in general, but the one place where the Crimean War shows up in the course and exam description, what we want to note is that France and Britain and Russia fight a war with each other over whether Russia is going to be able to take advantage of the weakness of the Ottoman Empire. And what this does, the concert of Europe, is about all of the, of the great powers being on the same page. So when France and Britain are fighting a war against Russia, Russia, first of all, is undermining the concert system and the conservative order because Russia's trying to interfere with the balance of power. The whole point of this whole system with the balance of power was that everything should stay how it is. So when Russia's going to start moving in, that is undermining the concert system. So what happens here is that because of the Crimean War, the concert system is effectively dead. And so that is where you're going to see the system that without the concert system, now unifiers in Germany and Italy have more wiggle room because they're not being opposed by the concert system. So that's something there. Now, realpolitik and politique, these are really context. In a lot of cases, they're very similar because they're both very pragmatic. They both reject ideology, and they both embrace a degree of pragmatism. They say that what is best for the state is more important than what I believe. Okay, so when we think about politique, we think about Henry IV, Henry of Navarre, who said that, Paris is worth a mass. France is a Catholic country. It needs a Catholic king. I may personally be a Protestant, but France needs a Catholic king. Edict of Nantes, best way to end this civil war is for is to go ahead and just tolerate Huguenots where they are in certain cities. Okay, there are certain cities where there are Huguenots. Let's tolerate them in those places. That's going to be best for the country. So Bismarck's Realpolitik, this is about using the politics of power rather than rather than Italy. Okay, and so as far as that goes, yeah. And so what we want to note here is that, as far as Mr. Good's saying here, that when we think about Italy in 1848, France contributed to to Italy. France contributed to Italy's unification failing in 1848. So Cavour is basically making some strategic alliances, giving France a little help, and so France is like, look, we're not going to, we'll kind of, we'll help you out here on the unification. But then again, remember, I wouldn't get too deep into the weeds of Italian unification. I don't think that that's going to be a given topic necessarily, but do know a bit about it, but mostly in the context of German unifications. So how important do we need to know the revolutions of 1848? I'd say that's important. That's why I've got a 5-part video on it. So make sure to take a look at the revolutions of 1848, and I go very in depth there. Okay, so what is the score? Okay, so when we think about this, Isaac, we don't know yet what a passing score is on the DBQ. So what I've been saying is we need to be thinking in terms of that a 6, I think, is a safe 3. Okay, a 6 is a safe 3. That's what we want to go on for this, that a 6 would be a safe 3. I think that an 8 is a is a safe 4. A 9 would be a safe 5. Now, an 8 could be a 5. We don't know. They don't do this until, okay, they don't do this until the until the exams are scored. They look at the scores, how many 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s to 9s and 10s, and they say we're going to cut the scores here. So I would say that if you're looking for a reliable score that's going to pass the exam, I don't see a scenario, okay? I don't see a scenario where we are going to see where 6 is not passing. Now, one thing to note here that I don't think so, Suha, let's make sure when we're thinking about the Russian Revolution, because it's not, I don't think the Russian Revolution of 1905, that's an old format DBQ. That would be way too specific for this. Okay, I don't think that the Russian Revolution, that would be a dirty trick, and I don't think the College Board's going to pull a dirty trick. Now, I'm not saying that the College Board's not going to pull a dirty trick, because I think the College Board's full of great people, but I think that the College Board is looking out for their own self-interest, that they can't really afford to put something out there that's going to read like a dirty trick. Okay, so is it important to restate your thesis? Yes, Isabella, restate your thesis, but restate it in terms of restating the thesis in terms of don't use the same wording that you used in the introduction. Don't look back at it. So with that, but it is important to rewrite your thesis, okay, at the end of the DBQ, just in case you didn't get credit on the first one. Now, what we want to note here, Ava, we want to look at when we're thinking about the Balfour Declaration. We want to think that's not on the exam. The Balfour Declaration is a declaration of policy by the British government saying that they agree, in principle at least, with the formation of a Jewish state. But we want to understand that that is something that is not, that's something that is not going to be something that is going to be on the exam. Now, what could be on the exam, if we see a DBQ about nationalism, for example, in the late 19th century, we could get into Zionism, where we go into like things like the Dreyfus Affair, Theodore Herzl and his Zionist program, that we want to understand that Zionism is a form of nationalism. It is Jewish nationalism. That when Theodore Herzl wrote the Jewish state, okay, so when he wrote the Jewish state, So that's something that is, that the Jewish state is Theodore Herzl saying that essentially we want to connect this with the Dreyfus affair, because the Jewish state is coming out about the same time as the Dreyfus affair. So when everybody's watching the Dreyfus affair go down in France, what we want to understand is that in the 19th century, the Jews have tried to do all they can to assimilate. Think about this, Benjamin Disraeli. I mean, basically, Benjamin Disraeli, even though he converted to Anglicanism, here is someone who was born a Jew, and he is the prime minister of the, basically the most important country in terms of land control in the world. Okay, so we see here in the late 19th century that even though Disraeli, so I mean his name literally, the Israeli, Benjamin the Israeli, and so you've got this Jewish man who is the prime minister. Now understand that he did convert to Anglicanism, but in the eyes of Brits who were looking at him at the time, he's Jewish. Okay, I mean he may have converted to Anglicanism, but when they look at him, they see a Jew. But at the same time, even though they see a Jew, they elected a Jew as the leader of the Conservative Party. So we see that Disraeli is, the wooden backdrop's actually fake wood, but my air conditioner vent behind it will blow on it sometimes. Okay. Okay. So with that, so that's one hand. On one hand, we look at Disraeli, who is, a successfully assimilated Jew. Now, at the same time, he's not maintaining the Jewish religion. That's something that needs to be kept in mind. That he is, he has become Anglican, but this is something where even though he's an ethnic Jew, he's prime minister. Now, Dreyfus, Alfred Dreyfus, went to the French military academy, became a French military officer. Okay, so as far as that, he became a French military officer. So that's something that we go into here. Now, one thing I want to note is that just to note here that, let's see, Anglican, I believe like basically every prime minister of the UK. Every prime minister of the UK has been an Anglican. Okay, so one thing to note here is that Boris Johnson, the prime minister of the UK, is Anglican. Now, his mother was Catholic. Boris Johnson actually was raised by a Catholic mother, and then became Anglican when he was in school. Okay, so we see here that Johnson, is an Anglican. Before him, I'm guessing Theresa May was an Anglican. Like Gordon Brown was a member of the Church of Scotland, but he's Scottish. And so one thing to note, that even though the prime minister is not required to be Anglican, every prime minister has been part of the established church. Okay, so that's something that even though it's not by law, it's really by custom. Tony Blair, who was prime minister in the 1990s and into the 2000s, he converted to Catholicism after he left the prime minister seat. Okay, so it's a very interesting thing here when we start to think about that. So as far as that goes, when we think about this, we want to understand the Dreyfus affair convinced a lot of European Jews that they could not successfully assimilate. And that is the background of Theodore Herzl going into publishing the Jewish state. Okay, where can I access Practice Dbqs? Okay, so I see someone here wants to know about Practice Dbqs. I'm going to put them in the chat. Okay, I'm going to put them in the chat if y'all are watching later. Sorry, but I'm going to go ahead and put these in the chat. And all of these, most of these have been sent out to my mailing list. So as far as that goes, let me go ahead and I'll share one that I've got here on Napoleon, for example. Okay, so here is a Napoleon. Okay, so a Napoleon Practice Dbq. Now, also, I've got one. Now, y'all might want to note that in Crowdcast, you can buy into my writing clinic. I've got a 2-session writing clinic, And in the writing clinic, we have gone over the Napoleon Dbq, but I've also got a Dbq on the conservative order. So I'm going to share that, but y'all want to make sure there is a, when you go to my Crowdcast, you'll see a link to the AP Euro Dbq clinic. Okay, so Dbq on the conservative order. Okay, so we see here, let's see, so going for that Dbq on the conservative order. And both of these, now my Dbq on secularism and the Renaissance is available on my AP Euro Dbq page. But these two, now just make sure that you know that I am doing this writing clinic, and that's something that I think will be helpful to you. So there are Dbqs on Napoleon and the conservative order for those of you in the the Crowdcast stream. Okay, so as far as that goes, imperialism. Now, Victoria, we could talk about how imperialism is, we've already gone over imperialism in a previous session, kind of in depth, but we want to be sure that understand that national pride was one of the motives of imperialism. So we want to understand that there were strategic concerns, like the nations wanted to have naval bases and that sort of thing, economic concerns that they wanted a source of raw materials, they wanted people who are consumers for industrial goods, but also this nationalistic kind of thing that basically Britain, we've got the biggest empire, therefore we're the best nation. Belgium, you know what? We can have an empire too. Okay, we can show how great Belgium is by, just basically terrorizing the people in the Belgian Congo. So understand that nationalism is part of this. The French were thoroughly embarrassed in the Fashoda incident. So that was where the French and the British were competing for Egypt, and the British won out there. So France experienced a great deal of national embarrassment over that. So understand that imperialism is also linked to nationalism. That is one of the causes of imperialism, one of the motivations. So remember, we've got military and strategic motivations, we've got economic motivations, and we also have national pride motivations. Okay. So with that, can we go over how to use all 5 documents? Could be to pick a side. Now, as far as that goes, first of all, Viveki, there's nothing you get out of a conclusion paragraph. Okay, so all I recommend, no matter how many points you're trying to score, your conclusion is to restate your thesis. That's it. Okay, don't go into it any more than that. All right, so as far as that, all 5 documents, Alex. Now, again, I recommend the 3-document strategy. That a counter argument is something that you want to that's good if you're going for complex understanding. It's good to have a counter argument. Now, again, I've let y'all know I do have this writing clinic that is I think a great source of very in-depth information on writing. Okay, so you didn't learn about Greek independence. Greek independence happened in the 1820s. Okay, so the 1820s, Greek independence represents one of the first threats to the conservative order. And so the Greeks issued their Declaration of Independence, and they are embracing liberalism and nationalism. Now, what happens here is the great powers are not able to crush the Greek independence movement or stop it, partly because of romantic artists like Eugene Delacroix, who were painting things to arouse sympathy, because of people's fascination with, we think about humanism and classical studies, still around at that time. Not as the fundamental basis of the curriculum, but still a key part of school curriculum. And so with that, we see that the great powers come in and they actually end up supporting Greece to a point. Okay, so what happens is in the London Protocol of 1829, 1830, depending on which one you're looking at, the Greeks, they agreed to a very limited border. Okay, so what they wanted was like, we want a capital at Constantinople. They had their big wish list, and the great powers were like, this is your Greek nation. It's a lot smaller than that. Also, the Greeks consented to have a king. They basically brought in a European king to rule over this nation, new nation of Greece. So we see here where it was a challenge to the conservative order, but at the same time, it was something that even though it was a challenge to the conservative order, it was something that the conservatives came in and they were able to mitigate. Okay. And so as far as that, yes, if you, so Victoria, just to be clear about the writing clinic, if you purchase the writing clinic, you've also got access to the archived video from last time. So yeah, purchasing the writing clinic gets you the live session on Saturday and also the previous live session we did last Saturday. And that's basically, these are like 90-minute to 2-hour sessions. Like these are very in-depth with me going into like every detail of writing these DBQs. So, that's something that I think is a great investment. And also I'll be back, I'll be doing next week a combination of free live public sessions and also some sessions that are going to be for subscribers only, what I'll call salon reviews. Y'all want to look out for my salon reviews next week that are basically going to be small group sessions limited to like 30 people. And so with that, outside evidence. Now, outside evidence, I would say, Mikey, needs to be from within the time period. Okay. I would say it needs to be immediately relevant to the prompt. I would not reach outside the scope of the prompt for outside evidence. Contextualization can be outside because it is, as long as it's relevant. You're bringing in something that's possibly outside, as long as it helps set up helpful context. Okay. So for example, for a DBQ about Peter the Great, for a DBQ about Peter the Great, you want to think in terms of that we can think about the age of absolutism in general. Now, we could contextualize from Russia earlier, or we can do absolutism in general, like go into Louis the 14th or something like that. And so yeah. So now the thing is, Victoria, Breakfast with Richey is going to start. It's going to go on for a long time. It's not a 1-hour broadcast. That's going to go on for a long time. All right, so good one there about the College Board being Realpolitik. All right, that's funny. Now, colonialism, Victoria, usually we think, now they're kind of synonymous, but when we think about colonialism, we're typically thinking about that kind of first round of colonialism, the mercantilist, absolutist period. That's what we're thinking about there. And when we say imperialism or the new imperialism, that's what we're looking at, the late 19th century. All right. So as far as that, a specific link, I'll work on that, Holly. The thing is that I don't know how far and wide I want these DBQs necessarily going out. But we've got, I've given links on these broadcasts. So, I've tried to put that stuff out there. I may package them up, like bundle them in those terms. You know what? This actually would not be a bad idea. Let me just go ahead and say here that I'm going to make a new folder here. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, I just need to go in here, new folder. Okay, so let me try this. 2020 AP Euro original DBQs. Okay, so let me go in and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder here where we're going to put all of the ones that are original this year. Okay, so I've got enlightened absolutism, I've got the conservative order, I've got Napoleon. Okay, so Napoleon 2020 and okay, and then the last one, of course, secularism and the Renaissance. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that there. And so let's do this. Okay, what I'm going to send out now is I'm going to send out a link to this folder. Okay, so I'm going to send out a link to this folder, and then that way you've got a link to these original DBQs that I've written here. Okay, so let me go ahead and share this link. And what we're going to do here, let me do a few link settings here, and we want to, yeah, let's see. So disable shared link on May 14th. Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead with shared link to download this item. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and put that there, and we're going to copy that. So this should be, okay, so this is a link to a folder with all 4 DBQs. Okay, so link to a folder, all 4 DBQs I've written for this exam. Okay, for those of you in Crowdcast right now. Okay, and if you're watching later, just come to some more of my lives. I'll make this available to people who are watching live. All right. So with this, we've got that. So a specific link. So yes, Holly, I just shared that. Y'all let me know if y'all are able to access that. Okay. Could Queen Victoria be on the exam, Talia? Queen Victoria could be on the exam. Ahsoka Tano would be outside of the time period. Okay. And, long time ago in the galaxy far, far away, unless the DBQ is on the Mandalorian season 2, which I'm like super excited about now, knowing that Ahsoka Tano is going to be like in that season. All right. So do we need to know about the Hanoverians? I would not put the Hanoverians like very high up on my list. Would not. All right. And so as far as that, the main failures of the Third French Republic, I wouldn't get into that. I mean, the French Third Republic has like never specifically shown up on anything to the extent that I'm familiar with it. All right. So, am I going to do the basics of Christianity? Not a bad idea, Mark. I'll definitely think about that. Things are just getting really hectic this time of year, but I'm gonna think on that. All right. So with that, Queen Victoria, that's, really Victorian England is not really an expertise kind of thing here. But one thing I've noticed that has been trending. I've seen that like William Gladstone has been trending with AP Euro. So knowing about the, basically, the Gladstone and Disraeli rivalry couldn't hurt, but I don't know if I'd get too deep into it. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and put it into today's broadcast. Yes, there will be a night before Euro broadcast, James. Y'all stay tuned. I'm going to be in touch. I promise. It's just this week, I'm having to wrap up like with my private tutoring clients. And so my schedule's been very full, but that's going to be something that's going to, be resolved pretty soon. And I'll be putting some times out there. I'll be putting out a full broadcast schedule. So there we go. I'm sorry about that, Shivam. I will work harder, all that kind of stuff. We will be, we will do more in the future. Okay. So I'm going to be, getting back out here. I will be broadcasting a bunch exam week. Give me a couple days to get that schedule out there and we'll go forward with it. It's always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.